Yes, out of panic, but also there was that weird thing, and I think most comic freelancers or any freelancer gets it, is that all my neighbors, everyone I knew, all of a sudden were working from home, and like that was my thing. So all of a sudden like my days almost got more active because like all of a sudden like my neighbors are all around because instead of going to the office they were at home. So I relished kind of like holding away in my studio in my backyard so I could just focus on the work. But like I was at a weird point too in my career because like I just finished negotiating with Marvel, in which I was no longer exclusive with them. And so DC stuff kind of came around, Batman the Knight, and that became kind of my pandemic project. Like the fact that they weren't like the publishing schedule had changed meant like I could really focus on that book. And we got so far ahead on it too. It was like, I think by the time issue 1 came out, we'd done 8 issues. We had 8 issues in the can. So it was weird because it took the pressure off for publishing because publishing got pushed back. But I had the pressure in my freelance brain of, everything's collapsing. I need to get work while I can. And being kind of a free agent between DC and Marvel made that a little bit easier.
Yeah, I mean, that never, especially as a freelancer, that never really goes away. Everything just always feels tenuous at all times.
No, having to train myself to say no after years of being a freelance illustrator was just like so hard to be like, oh, actually, no, I can't do this, or my wife will leave me because it's too much. Like even now, like going into 2023, I still had 13 ongoing projects that were on my desk, and I've got it down to 8 now. And I keep promising my family and my friends that number is just going to get smaller and smaller as we go on. Now that I'm trying to ease out of that panic.
Do you find that that's just you generally operate better when you have multiple projects to jump around between?
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of those things I always have to explain to my loved ones because they're like, oh, you have so many projects. Like, you work too much. I'm like, oh, I'd be working the same amount if I only had like 2 projects.
Yeah.
It takes as long as it takes. And like, especially with writing, if I know I have to get it done by next week, I'll get it done by next week. If I know I have to get it done by next month, I'll get it done by next month. And there'll be a lot of kind of like fiddling around in the meantime if I've got like a whole month to do a thing. So yeah, I find my brain works better when there's like a lot on the go. I like putting out fires. That's like my biggest thing. I need there to be fires because I need to put them out.
I do think that that's something that people that have never freelanced don't appreciate, is how important it is to have specifically a deadline. And then obviously there's this idea of killing your darlings, because it would be very easy to just completely obsess over a single issue or panel.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also good just to, especially with comics, and because I tend to do a wide variety of stuff, to tonally switch around when you get too deep into a thing. Like right now I'm doing Batman and Daredevil, and that's actually not good for my brain because they're both Daredevil. The way I'm kind of writing the character, it's a bit more of a serious take, but like writing kind of the grim, gritty superhero is fun. But when it kind of consumes most of your life, it's like you can feel a little bit of depression kind of sinking in. Like I'm glad I got my own thing with public domain going on the side because that feels lighter, even though the subject matter isn't necessarily.
So when working on a grim and gritty project, then your brain clicks into grim and gritty mode all the time?
Yeah, you put on the kind of the sad operatic music and tune out the world. And, I've got a Batman playlist for sure, and it's very similar to the Daredevil playlist. And I don't have anything quite light, like, we were talking before this about Jughead. I used to do Jughead, and that was great. Like, that was so light, like, you could balance anything out with Jughead, and I don't quite have that right now. Partly because like there's not a big push for comedy books right now with the companies, so it'd be harder to kind of get those kind of off the ground. Public domain is probably the exception because I'm able to kind of couch that in kind of family drama stuff. Look at me pushing my creator-owned work on an interview about Batman.
I got a lot of Batman questions. Sorry. What is on the Batman playlist?
I mean, a lot of Batman. Like
Okay.
basically,
Like scores.
yeah, scores from all the movies, and uh the scores from like a lot of Max Richter stuff, the guy who did like The Leftovers, and oh, what's another one? There's like If Beale Street Could Talk.
Okay.
Uh, so I'm just looking it up here.
He's pulling up the playlist right now.
I'm pulling up the playlist. Yeah, If Beale Street Could Talk. Nicholas Britell. Nicholas Britell's a great composer, and that score in particular is really haunting and kind of elegant, and it kind of gets me into that brain space a bit.
What is the process like for you in those months leading up to taking the reins on a series like Batman?
Batman is its own thing because it is so big, and I mean it's DC's like, it's weird to say it, but it's like kind of their biggest book in terms of like the monthly schedule stuff. Like you'll have like kind of the outliers and miniseries. It's Batman, right? And it happened really fast for me during a period where I was too busy because I just started doing the Substack stuff. So when I was offered the book by Marie and Ben Abernathy, it was just like a Zoom call kind of out of the blue, and I just started kind of holding my head, and I almost started crying as I started talking because I'm like, "You please don't offer this to me now, not right now. I just signed a Substack deal. Like I'm writing and drawing a book. I can't." And I didn't say no outright, but I definitely said I've got to go think about it because I can't figure out the schedule of it. They were very accommodating, but the timeline was very quick on it. So with any book I get offered, Marvel and DC, like I know there are a lot of creators who already have ideas for these characters. Like they have notebooks filled with their ideas from when they were kids or something, and they're just waiting to unleash them. And I don't have that. Like I do not think about potential storylines for characters unless I'm actively working on them. So Batman was like most of the offers I've had over the years, where I had to go away, think about it, not say yes right away, and see if I had a story I wanted to tell, if it was worth. There have been times in the past with like Marvel and DC where I didn't. I love the character, but I just didn't. I was offered like to write The Flash. It was like backup stories, I think, when Josh Williamson was starting, and I was like, it's one of my favorite characters, sure. And I went away and I started to think about it. I'm like, I came up with some ideas. I'm like, oh no, these aren't things I really want to do. And so I said no. Those moments are a little heartbreaking once you realize you don't have anything. But I had something for Batman, and the more I thought about it, the more excited I got. So then it just became a part of pitching it to them, saying yes, pitching it fully, and seeing where they stood on it. And they liked my plans. Thank God. That would have been a little heartbreaking. And I had to kind of basically present like kind of the first year what I was thinking. Because that's the other thing with the bigger characters is they really need to know what's happening to Batman, because I don't know if you know this, but he shows up in a lot of books. and also with a character like that, it's got to be passed by kind of higher levels than what I'm usually used to. Because I've either, working on something like Daredevil for Marvel, it's like, okay, Daredevil's off on his own. You can do whatever you want with the character. Working on Spider-Man, you have to run stuff by people, but I wasn't on the main book there. But with Batman, it's like, okay, if I'm going to like, I don't know, give him a haircut, like the toy department needs to find out about it. Like somebody needs to know above, even my editors, what my plans are for the character, because it's got to be reflected like across the brand, really. So that's kind of a new thing for me in the pitch. And then it was just hitting the ground and just starting to write, get a feel for the character. The first issue always takes the longest. And there was some pressure because the artist, Jorge Jimenez, he wasn't supposed to start until later because he had another project. He was going to do his Mark Miller book. And then that didn't happen until much later, obviously, because it's coming out now. So all of a sudden I had to deliver scripts really quickly. And so that was a lot of pressure. But exhilarating too, because like, no matter how jaded you get, writing kind of superhero stories for companies, like there's something really cool when you're like, and then he pulls out a batarang, typing these things
Mhm.
out, and the
Yeah.
Batmobile roars to life. Like, it still tickles a part uh, in your big kid brain. Yeah, and then we were off to the races. Like everything happened really fast. Jorge is a machine. He's a dynamo, producing amazing pages on an intense schedule, and staying upbeat about it, and staying handsome. Like,
Great hair too. Yeah.
I know if I wasn't working directly with him, I'd hate him. But as it is, I love him. So really keeping that going and that momentum going has been a challenge, but also been a lot of fun.
You pitch that effectively like a year's worth of a book to Marie and Company, and then you have to effectively hew close to that for the rest of the year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are always kind of like curveballs thrown at you. Sometimes characters you can't use because they're in other books or plans
Mm.
change. I like to work really far ahead, which my editors appreciate, but also can cause problems down the line when I have to go back and rewrite a thing because I don't know, Green Lantern is no longer Green Lantern, or just as for example. But yeah, yeah, you stick as closely as you can to the plan, but also like if the story presents something new as you're writing it, you just ask the editor if like it's okay to change this thing. I've had experiences in the past because of the multiple artist nature on some books where I'd be feeding kind of three artists at the same time on like three different issues, and with gaps in between them. And I have had times where I'm like in a later issue that's being drawn first, I have a character who I decide to kill in an earlier issue. And so they have to redraw that character because I've
Mm.
made this decision, but it works so well for the story, and complications arise like that. But because Jorge's so fast, like he's able to really kind of dig into a full arc when we have him on the book. And then Mike Hawthorne with the second arc was like a similar thing. They're both just like entirely too professional.
I imagine like that in that blurred background, you've got one of those like Pepe Silvio cork boards behind you to really to map out all these moving pieces.
I've got nothing. I've got nothing.
No.
I'm in like a bare room. I've moved to like this tiny island, and then I brought none of my stuff. Yeah, no, like keeping track is actually really, really hard. And like sometimes you'll have situations show up where, God, I think there was like 1 month where I had 3 issues out of 3 separate books, and each of them had a scene with a funeral on a rainy day with a mysterious figure standing far away from it. And it's like you just feel like a total hack when that happens. You're just like, oh my God. But like you're trying to keep
Yeah.
track of everything, and writing things so far apart, and the release schedule's all weird. Yeah, that's the problem with the multiple projects.
As you alluded to, you've written a lot of these iconic characters previously, but
It's weird.
is there a sense in which, coming on to, I mean, especially Batman, and Batman is still in his own league, obviously. Is it intimidating, in a sense, given like the history, given how invested fans are, and given like the people who have come before you?
Well, one of the great things that happened after it was publicly announced is I got an email from comics legend and grumpy old man Mark Waid,
Mm-hmm.
in which he congratulated me on the gig and then said, "You may not know this, but Batman is the character in all of history who's had the most stories written about the character. Good luck finding a new idea." Love, Mark.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like the breadth of stories in history is a little intimidating, but overall, I don't find the job intimidating because it's just a story. I'm tackling it the way I would tackle Howard the Duck. I want to make the best comic I can,
Sure.
within the guardrails that have been provided by the company and the marketplace and whatever. Every once in a while, in the back of my head, there's a little voice that says, "Oh, DC's fourth quarter would really appreciate it if you sold more Batman comics." I'm like, okay, all right, little voice, I get it.
Yeah.
But the hope is just that if you make a story that you enjoy, that you stand behind, then the book will sell and people will enjoy it, and you won't run afoul of fans. But I also know like the bigger the character and with the bigger the history, you just can't please everyone. It's impossible.
No, it's impossible.
There's
with
no
comic
way.
fans. Yeah.
Well, because also everyone's just got their own idea of what the character should or should not be, and because the character of Batman, there were so many versions of the character, and they all work. You can have an Adam West story, you can have a Frank Miller story, you can have a Brubaker story, and they're all different versions of the character, but they all work because the character is so malleable and has been around for a zillion years. So someone might not want solo grim and gritty Batman. Maybe they want like kind of paternal Batman, or they might not want cosmic Batman. They want like street level Batman. And it's like, well, I can't please everyone, so I got to just kind of like do what I do. And I tend to appreciate all the versions of the character. I don't have like a favorite, so I feel comfortable having an arc like the current one with Mike on art. There's a lot of street level stuff, a lot of like picking yourself up off the ground and continuing to fight. But then also in my run with Jorge, the first one, I had Batman fall from the moon. Like that is very like that's very cosmic level, like Batman plans for everything wackiness that kind of leans more into like the Grant Morrison, Batman shoots Darkseid and gets sent back in time. Like they're all accurate versions of the character because it's Batman.
Yeah, it's a sense in which the breadth and history actually like works to your advantage in that case. But you mentioned Grant Morrison, and I mean they seem to loom pretty large over your work in particular. Yeah. Is there a sense in which their run on the book was like a starting point or a departure point for you?
It kind of happened naturally because the starting point was really, I hate to bring him up again, Mark Waid, the Justice League, the Tower of Babel storyline, because there's the question there, for the Publishers Weekly readers that might not know. The storyline was about Batman had a contingency plan for all the members of the Justice League in case they went rogue or bad. That was hacked and created all sorts of problems. And so the question in my head was, well, what's the contingency plan for Batman?
Yeah.
And so really it started from Mark's run. And then once I realized that Zur-En-Arrh is kind of the perfect switch for that, then it started to go more heavily into Grant's stuff. But like I think Grant's run it might be the best Batman run of all time. Like, there have been so many great runs. It's hard to actually like, pinpoint a best. But because I tapped into the Zur-En-Arrh stuff and I'm kind of leaning heavily into that, and then like what that kind of means for the storyline, I've definitely given the impression this is me doing a bit of a lesser impersonation of Grant Morrison. Because like, I mean, they're a genius. Like I can't compete with that.
Whom amongst us
on any level. And there is a part of me that's like, well, it's folly to even like put Zur-En-Arrh in this. But I think that's the fun of comics, and you kind of have to play with that history and not be intimidated by it, because that's what everyone before you has done. Like Grant picked up the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh comic from like the Silver Age and revamped it for their run. And so I'm doing the same with Grant's take on that idea and expanding it out and having fun with it as well. I hope they see it as me just loving their work and wanting to play with it and not retroactively ruining it.
You haven't talked to Grant about it yet?
No, it's a weird one. Like I don't know if I should. Like,
let them come to you.
Yeah, like I feel like if they had a problem with that, I would have heard about it. And frankly, if they did have a problem with it, I'd probably scale it back. I'd probably change a lot of plans, because you don't want to kind of piss off the creators, even though again, like he's the creator, but also he played with Batman history for it. yeah, like in the past, I've had it relatively easy in terms of like comparisons to original creators and how I would handle reworking their creations. Like back at Marvel, my first book was Howard the Duck, and I would not have written that book if Steve Gerber was still alive. Like, there's just no way. Like, because he's just so linked to that character. But I because he was no longer with us, and I don't believe in ghosts, I went ahead and wrote it. Yeah. So yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea what Grant thinks about all this because I'm sure they've found out that I've been
I'm
messing
sure.
with Zdarsky.
They're pretty. They seem to be pretty plugged into things. Yeah.
I get their Substack and I quickly search for my name. Like, oh, it hasn't come up this week. All right. It doesn't change their run at all. Like, that's the one thing
No, of
about
course.
comics. Like, we all have our lines as to what we'll do and what we won't do within the corporate comics world. And like, my hope always with this kind of thing is that it brings even more attention to those stories. Like, if somebody picks up my issue where Zdarsky appears, which is like a wild looking thing, I give just enough context to kind of bring the reader along, but not so much that they fully understand the history. If that prompts them to go to the comic shop and be like, I need to know more about this, and get a copy of like Batman R.I.P. or great. That's fantastic.
That's what the editor's notes are for.
Yeah, exactly.
If I had to give an elevator pitch, as we call it in my industry, for failsafe, it seems to be that Batman is the ultimate Batman villain.
Yeah, and like, it can be a bit cliche at times. The hero kind of creates their own worst enemy, but out of all the heroes, I think Batman is best to fit that bill. And it's not just that; I've tried to frame it as the paranoia of youth. Like, one of the things I recognized when I came on board the title is that this version of Batman is a little bit older. Like, they've aged him up a little bit, which makes sense considering there's so many Robins around. And because he's older, like, his outlook has changed, and I like the thought of the younger Batman being paranoid and coming up with all these fail safes, and now the current day Batman, who maybe recognizes that maybe those things aren't necessarily needed now that he has like a group of friends and family around him. He's not the sole lone wolf out in the night air anymore. That he recognizes those mistakes of youth. So yeah, Batman's his own worst enemy, but it's like Batman at various points in his life is his own worst enemy to himself now.
Is it a book about becoming a parent?
On some level, sure. Especially in these kind of the opening chapters. But I'm also like, I want to dive into the question of, when you inspire people to follow you, are you now responsible for them all? And what does that look like? Especially when there's violence involved in like a lot of life or death situation. So it's been mined a lot in the past, the Jason Todd relationship. The Robin that he failed, the Robin that died and came back and is like a mass murderer and all this stuff. And even I mined it in my kind of first modern Batman story, which was like a Batman Red Hood piece in the anthology that DC was putting out. But I think that still looms large over all of it, especially since Red Hood is a character that exists in the comics and he's a mass murderer, and Batman failed him on so many levels. That doesn't get swept under the rug very easily. And so I want to play a lot with that. Tim Drake is the Robin that I've been using in this run. And part of the reason for that is in his title, he's come out, he's dating, he's like And part of that process is figuring out what makes you happy. And Batman's not a happy character, but he sees the potential for happiness in his son, and he's like, how can he have a happy life if he's, you know, crippled in an accident and harmed all the time, and like his loved ones are in danger. Like there's so much wrapped up in this lifestyle, and to see his son kind of move towards happiness makes Batman question whether or not all of this is right. Like, should it just be a one-man war on crime?
This is also cliche to a certain extent now, I think for good reasons. But it sounds like it's also a book about generational trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, that's a thing in our culture these days. And even within my family and my wife's family and friends that I know, dealing with that kind of inherited trauma. Yeah. Robin's are inherited trauma in a lot of ways. They have their own for sure, but they're along for the ride, and they're picking up that vibe off old Bruce Wayne there.
Yeah. I guess sort of my gets back to the idea of youthful arrogance, youthful hubris. I'm not a parent myself, but I'm told that part of the experience, of having kids is sort of going through a lot of those sort of earlier transgressions of your youth.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm not a parent either, but talking to my friends and my parents, like, it's pretty wild what you go through when you become a parent in terms of like just recontextualizing your history, your family history.
And this is, as we said, going to be inevitable for a character that's been around for, I guess basically 100 years at this point. The idea of a Batman book without Batman is not a new one, but that does open a lot of interesting avenues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like in our second arc with Mike, we're experiencing a Gotham that didn't have a Batman. It's just lousy in different ways.
That's an interesting point, and I think that is one that Batman has grappled with over the decades of, am I actually helping?
Yeah, like you definitely see how its absence affects Gotham City in our second arc. Like, it is better to have a Batman there, but I very consciously did not have the other Robins in that second arc, because I want that to be kind of a question in his head as well. Like, where are they? Where's Dick Grayson and Tim Drake and Jason Todd? Like, did they actually go have good lives? Are they firefighters or something? Like, what ended up being their calling without me there? That was a pretty deliberate choice on my part to like not have them there, to keep that question kind of hanging.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a reason why that framework keeps coming back over time, is it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Obviously there are at least like theoretically like built-in limits to the character. Do you have your own guidelines as far as how far you're willing to push it? And I ask, and you brought this up before, the falling from the moon segment. Yeah. This is obviously a relative statement relative to Batman and superheroes in general, but is there some sense in which even something like that has to be grounded in some reality?
Oh, definitely. Like, it has to have a whiff of plausibility to it, as plausible as a man able to just swing around a city, which is like with a hook and a line.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, that's the kind of the baseline. Yeah,
and like that issue in particular, like I brought in my friend, another name drop, Ryan North, who's the smartest man I know. He wrote a book on like supervillains and science, and he's a computer engineer. Mm-hmm. And I ran the scenario past him. I'm just like, this is what I think would happen. This in order to plausibly have him make it back to Earth, considering the Batman of it all. Can you help me kind of piece that together? And so together with Ryan, we kind of worked out like the math behind it, and like the possibility of it, and how the gravitational force how far you can push it before your body basically explodes. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that was a ton of fun to actually figure that out, because it is ludicrous. Like, I recognize it's ludicrous, but it's also cool and badass, and like the kind of fun that I love in a wild Batman comic.
If the floor is swinging around the city, then the ceiling is Superman, right? Like we already have a Superman. You don't want Batman to be Superman.
No, there has to be a feeling of danger, and he has to like kind of work it out. He has to use his kind of like his heightened intellect and like, you know, the various gadgets to figure it out. It can't be an easy task, you know, which is why I also, you know, you have him pass out at some point during this, like even he cannot kind of get through unscathed. But yeah, to me that issue is like, it's what comics is all about. It would look stupid in a movie. I know it would look stupid in a movie. like, I don't need Robert Pattinson falling from a moon.
Yeah, that might be like a Schumacher.
Maybe,
choice.
yeah. Like I would. Don't get me wrong. I'd be on my feet cheering if Robert Pattinson as Batman fell from the moon and survived. But this is the 4-color comics version of Batman, and you can definitely have a lot more fun with it. You know, in the first arc, I really wanted to like just bounce him around as much as I could. Like, I wanted to go to the bottom of the ocean with Atlantis. I wanted to go to the moon. I wanted him to be on the run, and this cool looking villain that also probably wouldn't work in live action. Like, you know, a lot of people you can kind of see them writing comics for movies, TV. Like, oh, if I create this kind of character, like I could picture the actor playing them, or this storyline would work really well with the future vision of Marvel or DC. And I just can't do that. Like, I've been hired to write comics, and I love comics, and I love how wacky they can be. And like, you know, even over, you know, once again, sorry, DC publicity, over in Daredevil, like the stuff myself and my artist Marco were doing on Daredevil is just like big and wild and globetrotting, and like it's the total opposite of like the Marvel Universe version of Daredevil that's seen in the MCU. But that's what makes it fun, like the challenge of like, here's the story. Here's Batman falling from the moon. I dare you to turn this into something besides a comic, which is like just such a fun form of entertainment.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's beautiful recognizing the not only the limits, but there are certain things that you can do in that medium versus, you know, pretty much any other, which is beautiful.
Yeah, like movies and TVs have caught up for sure. Like, you look at the Marvel movies, and like, you know, Endgame, and I remember just laughing seeing Spider-Man on a winged horse with the Infinity Gauntlet. Like, it's so stupid, and I can't believe they're doing it.
In a good way.
So like, in a good way, yeah. Like the movies have kind of caught up, but also I forget who, you know, first talked about it, like that there's no budget, Hollywood budget on a comics page. Like, you can do whatever you want on it.
Sounds like something Jack Kirby would have said, but I'm just
yeah. It does sound like a Kirby thing. So yeah, to make it as like kind of art, I don't want to say artistic, but stylized as possible, and as big and fun and kind of wild as possible. I think that's the purpose of comics when it comes to like the kind of the big superhero stuff.
How far into that year that you pitched are not comics that have actually come out, but have you written?
I've written all the way to, I just sent in the script for 136, and I've got the next 5 or 6 issues plotted out. So I'm jumping into those this week.
What percentage of that sort of initial pitch, though, or have you hit, do you think?
I think the initial pitch I've hit. The storyline that we're starting up now is stuff that kind of came about after the first couple of weeks on the job, where I was like, hey, you know, this is going well, and this kind of sparked what I think is the next act in this. And so like in my head, I've got I've got several years kind of going around in my head, and I've got like approval for like, the first 2 years. But these things can change. I've been very fortunate in the sense that I've been able to kind of leave jobs instead of being forced off jobs.
Yeah.
The only time I can think of like where I was like told that, oh, we have to cancel this book is Star-Lord. It was the week after issue 1 hit the stands. I was told, oh, we're only going to 5 issues. I'm like, oh, well, that really sucks. But for the most part, like I've been able to kind of determine the end of my story and kind of leave books, which has been great. And I recognize that as being kind of a privileged position to be in when people kind of struggle to kind of get their 5-issue series turned into 10. But with Batman, like it feels so endless because of all the iterations of Batman. I've basically told DC like, unless something changes and my brain says I can't do this anymore, like this is the job that I'm going to be fired from at some point. And I recognize that because it's DC's big book, and if I have a misstep and the sales don't work out, or I butt heads with somebody and they decide to get me off the book, that's the only way I'm leaving the book.
I like that you're setting the bar at being fired from the book.
That's what I told them, because like DC's offered me more books, and I said no because of my schedule, and also because I want to focus on this and make it as good as I can. And I told them like, I can't do any other books, but this is the book I'm doing, and I'm going to do it for as long as they'll have me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sense in which character-wise where you've kind of you've hit the top. Like, where do you go from Batman?
I don't really see it like that. Like you go to Plastic Man. Like, I don't know, you have fun. Like you do the books. Like there was a creator years ago, another writer, who really thought of his career that way. Like you have to like always be going up a character, and then they hit the top, and they're like, what else can they offer me? I'm like, I don't know, just like a thing that you enjoy.
Yeah.
Like,
that's the Grant Morrison route, is like, going to Animal Man.
Yeah. Have fun. Like, I mean, partly because he's one of my best friends. But I look to Matt Fraction's career where he had that rise. He was doing like entry-level Marvel books like Punisher War Journal or whatever, moving up to Iron Man, moving up to X-Men, and doing his event, his Fear Itself event, like doing the big time, deal. And then like he stepped back from it all, did Sex Criminals with me, but also like he did Hawkeye, which is an absolute joke book.
Yeah.
To be offered
pre him being a movie star.
Yeah, exactly. To be offered at that time. And he was like, oh, I'm going to have fun with this. And he did. And he made the best book of the year from Marvel. Yeah. I think it was like their top trade seller too. Like, and there are a lot of writers that would not do that unless they're just like desperate for the paycheck. Like, oh my God, like, I blew it on Batman. Like I've got to take, character D to make my rent. But for Matt, it was like, oh no, like you can have fun there. There isn't the pressure of X-Men or the big event. So I'd imagine if I got fired from Batman, if I still had an itch to do the stories for Marvel and DC, I would find something that I just really love to do. Like anything else is folly as far as I'm concerned. If you're planning your career on like climbing that weird ladder of characters, like I don't know, that's not a creative pursuit then.
Yeah, you alluded to this a little bit with, like suddenly like, oh, I'm writing, something about a Batarang or the Batmobile, but the double-edged sword of getting to do exactly what you want to do is that at a certain point, like you have to remind yourself that you're doing this completely ridiculous thing. Yeah,
I mean, it helps to have a life partner who keeps you in check. Like I remember one point years ago when I was doing Spider-Man, I walked into the house all angry, and I walked into the kitchen, and my wife was there, and I was just like, I was furious. And I was just like, oh my God, like the Spider Office totally screwed me over. I need to use Doctor Strange, but it turns out he's on the other edge of the universe fighting this demon. And she's like, can you listen to yourself? Like that is not that is not a real problem. Yeah. Like So whenever I talk about my issues with work, and she talks about her issues with work, even as the words leave my mouth about like trying to figure out which Robin to use for the story or whatever, it sounds so stupid that it checks me again. Like, oh yeah, no, my job is like, it's fun if I let it be fun.
Yeah. I am both old enough and immersed enough in the indie comics. Most of the writing that I do around comics or through my podcast, it's like indie alternative stuff. So I do remember, your pre-superhero stuff. And obviously, especially in those days, this has changed to a certain extent, but especially in those days, there was certainly like no really clear path from indie comics, alternative comedy, humor comics into superheroes. Yeah. Did this seem like an unrealistic dream?
I mean, it wasn't a dream. Like I worked at a newspaper and I put out kind of my own comics either online or in print whenever I could because I enjoyed making them. But it wasn't with a goal in mind. I didn't have a career kind of planned out because I already had the career. Like Sex Criminals, like blew everything open because like it was a fun idea and I wanted to work with my buddy, and then it opened these doors. And then it's Will Moss, the editor at Marvel, contacted me and said like, "Hey, San Diego Comic-Con a few years ago, I bought Monster Cops from you," which was like an all ages anthology book that I did. And he was like, "It turns out you can write too. Like you're not just the artist on Sex Criminals. So do you want to pitch like Howard the Duck?" Like doing the joke book got me into the joke book at Marvel and the sex joke book at Image. But then like stories evolved and like the joke books kind of became a bit more serious, a bit more heart, and then got darker and crazier. Next thing you know, I'm writing Batman.